In the quiet suburban town of Eugene, Oregon, the Mitchell family appeared to be just another example of middle-class stability in the mid-2000s. Karen Mitchell, born in 1972, was a stay-at-home mother who devoted much of her time to maintaining her household and raising her teenage daughter, Allison. Neighbors often described Karen as polite but somewhat reserved, the kind of woman who preferred the privacy of her own home over the bustling social circles of the town. Her husband, Robert Mitchell, born in 1968, was well known in the community as a contractor who specialized in home renovations and small-scale commercial construction. By all outward appearances, Robert was hardworking, dependable, and financially secure. The Mitchells had lived on Maplewood Drive since 1999, in a modest but well-kept two-story home with a neatly trimmed front yard and a reputation for hosting quiet family barbecues during the summer months. From the outside, their marriage seemed steady, though not overly affectionate. Karen and Robert were not known for public displays of romance, but their shared life followed a consistent pattern. Robert working long hours on construction sites or in his office downtown, and Karen managing the home. To friends and relatives, there was little reason to suspect any deep fractures beneath the surface. Their daughter Allison, who attended South Eugene High School, was often the focus of Karen's attention, while Robert was perceived as the financial backbone of the household. On Sundays, the family could sometimes be seen attending services at a local Methodist church, though Robert's attendance became less frequent over the years as his workload increased. Financially, the Mitchells were comfortable, though not wealthy. Robert's contracting business, Mitchell & Company Renovations, had gained steady clients across Oregon. By 2006, he was bidding on larger projects, including small commercial complexes and rental properties. His business required him to travel occasionally, though he usually framed these trips as quick out-of-town consultations or overnight stays for work. Karen rarely questioned his absences, trusting his explanation that such demands were part of the growth of his company. The family's stability gave Karen little reason to doubt her husband's stories, though she sometimes confided to her sister that she felt Robert had become more distant with time. Still, there were hints of unease beneath the calm surface. Some neighbors noticed that Robert often returned home late at night, his truck pulling into the driveway long after Karen and Allison had gone to bed. Others mentioned seeing him making phone calls outside, speaking in low tones as if he did not want to be overheard. Karen herself had grown accustomed to his absences, chalking them up to the pressures of business. But in private, she sometimes worried whether her husband's long hours truly added up. Their life carried the rhythm of normalcy until one autumn evening in October 2006, when a series of events would unravel the carefully constructed image of the Mitchell family. What began as a typical household in a quiet Oregon neighborhood would soon be remembered as the center of one of the most perplexing and scandalous criminal investigations in the state. The story that emerged would reveal secrets of betrayal, double lives, and motives for murder that no one in Eugene had ever expected. Robert Mitchell's reputation as a contractor, husband, and father would be rewritten in the shadow of violence, and Karen Mitchell, once seen as a quiet, dutiful wife, would soon find herself at the center of suspicion. On the morning of October 14, 2006, Eugene awoke to an unsettling piece of news that quickly spread across the quiet town. Robert Mitchell, a 38-year-old contractor, was found dead inside his black Ford Explorer, parked along a remote turnout near Highway 58, roughly 20 miles outside the city limits. The discovery was made by a passing truck driver shortly after 6:30 a.m., who noticed the SUV idling with its headlights still on. When the driver approached to check on the situation, he saw Robert slumped behind the wheel, a single gunshot wound to his chest. The scene was grim yet strangely calm. The engine was running, the doors were locked, and Robert's cell phone sat untouched on the passenger seat. The authorities were called immediately, and by sunrise, local deputies and crime scene investigators had cordoned off the area. The news struck the Eugene community with disbelief. Robert had always seemed like an ordinary man, committed to his work and family. His sudden violent death felt out of place in a town more accustomed to petty thefts and occasional drug busts than to homicide. Neighbors who heard the news described their shock, many recalling recent conversations with Robert about his latest projects and plans. For Karen Mitchell, the call from police that morning was devastating. She had gone to bed the night before assuming her husband was working late on paperwork as he often did. Instead, she awoke to officers at her door, informing her that Robert had been killed. As investigators began piecing together Robert's final hours, questions mounted quickly. Where had he been the previous night? Why was he found so far from home, in a desolate area with no apparent reason for him to be there? And perhaps most pressing, who would want him dead? The Mitchell family became the immediate focus of the police inquiry. Detectives noted that in many cases when a married man is murdered, suspicion often turns first toward his spouse. Karen, however, appeared devastated during questioning. She explained that Robert had left home around 8 p.m. on October 13th, claiming he needed to meet a client about a construction bid. He never returned. Karen stated she had stayed home with their daughter Allison, who confirmed her mother's account. Though shaken and distraught, Karen's behavior seemed consistent with that of a grieving widow. At least in the first hours, she did not appear to fit the profile of a cold-blooded killer. Still, investigators did not ignore potential motives. Friends of the Mitchells were interviewed, and several pointed out subtle strains in the couple's marriage. While no one recalled major public arguments, many noted Robert's increasing absences, his frequent phone calls, and his habit of spending nights away on supposed business trips. Karen, they suggested, might have grown suspicious or resentful. Detectives could not dismiss the possibility that marital conflict had played a role. At the same time, Robert's business dealings drew scrutiny. As the owner of Mitchell & Company Renovations, he had entered into contracts with property developers and landlords across Oregon. Some colleagues described him as reliable and professional, while others mentioned disputes over payments, deadlines, and workmanship. Investigators began to wonder whether Robert's professional life contained hidden tensions. Could a disgruntled client or rival have taken revenge? The autopsy, completed 2 days later at the Lane County Medical Examiner's office, confirmed that Robert had died from a single close-range gunshot wound. The bullet was traced to a .38 caliber revolver, though no weapon was found at the scene. Toxicology tests revealed no drugs or alcohol in his system. This only deepened the mystery. Robert had been sober, seated in his vehicle, apparently approached at close range by someone who shot him deliberately. The locked doors suggested either he knew his killer or that the car had been locked afterward. Nothing had been stolen. His wallet, cash, and watch remained intact. The evidence pointed away from a random robbery and toward something far more personal. Public reaction intensified as local newspapers picked up the story. The Eugene Register-Guard published headlines like, "Contractor Found Dead in SUV, Police Investigate Possible Homicide." Reporters swarmed Maplewood Drive, photographing the Mitchell home and questioning neighbors. Karen, pale and visibly shaken, declined most interviews, speaking only briefly to say she trusted the police to find whoever was responsible. Allison, shielded by relatives, stayed out of public view. Behind the scenes, detectives were already discovering troubling inconsistencies. When they traced Robert's phone records, they noticed multiple calls to numbers that Karen did not recognize. Further investigation revealed that one of those numbers belonged to a woman in Sacramento, California. A woman who, according to early reports, had been in regular contact with Robert for months. This revelation hinted at the possibility of a double life, one that neither Karen nor Robert's business associates seemed fully aware of. The picture of Robert Mitchell as a simple contractor and family man was beginning to unravel. The once quiet tragedy of a suburban death was evolving into a complex mystery filled with deceit, secrets, and motives that reached far beyond Eugene. For investigators, the challenge was no longer just identifying who killed Robert, it was untangling who he really was. The true unraveling of the Mitchell case began in the days following Robert's death, when investigators started connecting pieces that didn't fit the portrait of a hard-working contractor and loyal family man. At first, Karen Mitchell had clung to the belief that her husband had been the victim of a random act of violence, maybe even a robbery gone wrong. But by the end of that week, the evidence suggested otherwise. Detectives at the Lane County Sheriff's Office began a meticulous review of Robert's phone records, financial documents, and travel history. What emerged shocked everyone involved. Robert had not only been in contact with a woman in Sacramento but also maintained a second residence under an alias. Records showed that he rented a small suburban home in Roseville, California, just outside Sacramento, under the name David Harris. He paid rent regularly in cash, and neighbors recalled seeing him at the property on weekends, sometimes accompanied by a younger brunette woman who introduced herself simply as Anna. When investigators informed Karen of these findings on October 18, 2006, she appeared visibly stunned. Friends who were present said she was pale, trembling, and unable to speak for several moments. "I didn't know," she finally whispered to detectives. "I thought he was working." Her grief quickly mingled with anger, as the idea of her husband's betrayal cut deeper than the loss itself. For police, however, Karen's reaction raised additional questions. Had she truly been unaware, or had she discovered Robert's double life before his murder and acted on it? The inciting moment for the investigation came when detectives visited the Sacramento woman, later identified as Anna Rowe, a 32-year-old freelance graphic designer. Anna initially denied knowing Robert Mitchell, but when confronted with photographs, she admitted she had been in a romantic relationship with him for over 2 years. To her, he had always been David Harris, a divorced contractor who split his time between Oregon and California for work. She claimed she had no knowledge of his real identity, nor the fact that he had a wife and daughter in Eugene. To the investigators' surprise, Anna insisted she had believed Robert's stories of business trips and long hours, and she had even considered moving in with him permanently. What shocked the detectives further was Anna's account of Robert's recent behavior. According to her, he had seemed increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to his death. He told her vague stories about financial stress, mentioning enemies and people who wanted him to fail. He had also grown distant, making fewer trips to Sacramento and cutting conversations short. Anna claimed that on October 12, 2 days before his death, Robert told her he needed to clear things up in Oregon before returning to see her. That was the last time she spoke to him. This revelation shifted the entire investigation. The case was no longer a simple domestic suspicion or a business rivalry. It was a complex tangle of deception with multiple potential motives. Karen had clear reasons to feel betrayed and possibly vengeful. But Robert's alleged enemies, either from business disputes or personal entanglements, also had reasons to wish him harm. The press quickly latched onto the scandal. Headlines exploded: contractor lived double life, wife and mistress in separate states, and murder in Eugene exposes secret identity. The story became a sensation, feeding on the contrast between the quiet suburban image of the Mitchells and the dark reality beneath it. Reporters camped outside Karen's home, shouting questions about whether she knew of her husband's second life. She avoided the cameras, often escorted by her sister or close friends. Allison, only 16 at the time, was kept away from school temporarily due to the media frenzy. Meanwhile, investigators probed Robert's business dealings more deeply. Financial records revealed unusual transfers. Thousands of dollars withdrawn from the Mitchells' joint account and funneled into separate accounts under Robert's alias. There were also payments to individuals whose names were unfamiliar to Karen. Detectives suspected Robert might have been involved in side deals, possibly even illegal ones, though nothing concrete surfaced yet. One associate, a subcontractor from Portland, admitted that Robert had owed him more than $15,000 from a project that never materialized. He described Robert as slick and two-faced, hinting that others in the business community had grown wary of him. The true inciting spark came on October 21, 2006, when police received a tip from a security guard working near the industrial park where Robert kept a small office in Eugene. The guard reported seeing Robert late at night, meeting with an unknown man in a dark sedan, only days before his death. The two men appeared to argue, with Robert raising his voice. The description of the stranger was vague: a tall man in his 40s wearing a leather jacket, but the tip added yet another layer of intrigue. Who was this man, and could he have been connected to Robert's murder? As detectives pursued this lead, public pressure mounted. Karen Mitchell, once seen as the grieving widow, was now scrutinized as a potential suspect. Neighbors speculated openly. Some believed she must have known about Robert's affair and killed him in a fit of rage. Others argued she was too quiet, too fragile, to commit such a violent act. The debate split the community. The inciting incident in this story was not merely Robert's death itself. It was the discovery of the secret life he had lived, a revelation that transformed a local homicide into a sensational case. His double identity, his affair with Anna Rowe, and his suspicious financial activities opened a labyrinth of possible motives. Each discovery pulled investigators further into a web where the line between personal betrayal and professional rivalry blurred. By the end of October 2006, the Eugene Sheriff's Office faced more questions than answers. Who had the most to gain from Robert's death? Was it Karen, betrayed and humiliated? Was it Anna, deceived and possibly enraged upon learning the truth? Or was it one of Robert's business associates, angry over debts and broken promises? The case had ignited, and the investigation was only beginning to expose the darker truths hidden beneath the Mitchell family's suburban facade. By late October 2006, the Eugene Sheriff's Office had launched a full-scale investigation into Robert Mitchell's murder. Detectives worked long hours, dividing their attention between his family life, his secret relationship, and his business dealings. Each avenue seemed promising, yet none provided a clear solution. The more they dug, the more complicated Robert's world appeared. What had once looked like the killing of a suburban contractor now resembled a case riddled with deceit, betrayal, and potential corruption. Investigators first turned their focus toward Karen Mitchell. As Robert's wife, she was the most obvious suspect, at least on paper. Detectives interviewed her multiple times, looking for inconsistencies in her statements. She repeated the same account. Robert left home around 8 p.m. on October 13th, telling her he had to meet a client about a new construction job. He never returned. Karen said she stayed home with her daughter Allison the entire evening, watching television before going to bed. Allison corroborated this story, explaining she had seen her father leave and did not hear him come back. Karen's alibi was solid, but investigators noted her demeanor. At times, she seemed cooperative and heartbroken. At other times, she appeared withdrawn and cold. Detectives debated whether this reflected guilt or simply grief. One officer noted in his report that Karen seemed more angry than sad when discussing her husband's double life. Still, without physical evidence tying her to the crime scene, there was little to charge her with. Attention then shifted to Robert's business network. Detectives reviewed contracts, bank records, and emails linked to Mitchell and Company. Renovations. They discovered disputes with at least 3 subcontractors, each involving unpaid bills or failed projects. One subcontractor from Portland, Stephen Doyle, grew particularly interesting. Doyle had sued Robert earlier that year for breach of contract, claiming Robert owed him tens of thousands of dollars. Though the case had been settled out of court, Doyle openly expressed his hatred for Robert during questioning, calling him a liar who cheated his way through business. Yet Doyle insisted he had nothing to do with the murder. He claimed he had been in Seattle on the night of October 13th, an alibi later confirmed by hotel records. Meanwhile, detectives in California pursued the lead involving Anna Rowe, Robert's secret partner. Interviews with her friends and co-workers painted a picture of a woman who had genuinely believed Robert was divorced and living under the name David Harris. Investigators checked her phone records, confirming frequent contact with Robert up until 2 days before his death. Anna tearfully explained that Robert had promised to move forward with her once he sorted things out. She insisted she had no knowledge of his real identity until after his death, when detectives revealed it to her. Still, detectives could not ignore Anna as a potential suspect. Was it possible she had discovered the truth earlier, confronted Robert, and killed him in a fit of rage? Her alibi placed her at home in Roseville on the night of October 13th, with a neighbor confirming they had spoken briefly in the late evening. Surveillance cameras near her neighborhood also recorded her car parked in the driveway overnight. For now, she too was cleared. The turning point in the initial investigation came when detectives revisited Robert's office in Eugene's industrial park. Inside, they discovered a locked filing cabinet filled with documents that raised more questions than answers. Hidden among invoices and client contracts were forged IDs bearing Robert's photograph but different names. In addition to David Harris, there were documents under at least 2 other aliases. Financial records showed transfers to bank accounts linked to these identities, many involving large sums of cash. Detectives began to suspect Robert had been running some kind of side operation, possibly fraudulent, possibly criminal. This discovery complicated the case. If Robert had been involved in illegal activities, it opened the possibility that his killer was not his wife or mistress, but someone connected to those dealings. Detectives theorized that Robert may have been laundering money, skimming profits from construction projects, or working with shady business partners. These were not the kinds of secrets that stayed hidden forever, nor were they the kinds that went unpunished. As the investigation deepened, the public narrative shifted. At first, Robert Mitchell had been mourned as a hard-working contractor and family man. Now, local newspapers and television broadcasts portrayed him as a man with 2 lives, 2 names, and too many secrets. Karen, once pitted as a grieving widow, was suddenly viewed with suspicion. Headlines questioned, did she know? The wife at the center of the Mitchell murder mystery. Meanwhile, Anna Rowe became a reluctant public figure, her name splashed across tabloids as the other woman. Detectives also investigated Robert's final movements on the night of his death. Surveillance cameras near a gas station along Highway 58 captured Robert's Ford Explorer around 8:45 p.m. on October 13. He appeared alone, purchasing fuel before driving toward the remote turnout where he was later found. Witnesses along the highway reported seeing his SUV parked there as early as 10 p.m. None recalled seeing another vehicle at that time, though one witness mentioned a dark sedan passing by slowly around 11 p.m., possibly the same car linked to the mysterious meeting days earlier. The forensic team worked tirelessly to extract evidence from the SUV. Fingerprints inside the vehicle belonged only to Robert and his family. The shell casing recovered from his chest wound matched a .38 caliber revolver, but no gun was found nearby. Investigators canvassed pawnshops and gun stores across Lane County, looking for recent purchases of such a weapon. Nothing definitive turned up. By early November 2006, detectives had built a case filled with leads but lacking clear direction. They had 3 main theories. Domestic motive: Karen Mitchell, betrayed and humiliated, could have killed her husband out of anger or revenge. Romantic motive: Anna Rowe, upon learning Robert's lies, might have confronted him violently. Business motive: an associate or rival, cheated or threatened by Robert's dealings, could have arranged his murder. Each theory carried weight, yet none had enough evidence to move forward. The initial investigation closed its first phase in a state of tension and uncertainty. Robert Mitchell's murder had shifted from a straightforward homicide to a puzzle of false identities, secret relationships, and suspicious finances. Detectives knew the truth was buried somewhere within these tangled layers. The challenge was digging deep enough to uncover it. The Mitchell case took a dramatic turn in mid-November 2006, when investigators uncovered evidence that shifted the direction of the entire inquiry. Up to this point, detectives had been circling around the 3 main motives: domestic betrayal, romantic revenge, and business conflict. Each angle produced leads but no definitive answers. What they found next, however, added an entirely new dimension to Robert Mitchell's double life and revealed just how deeply he had been entangled in dangerous dealings. The breakthrough came when financial crime specialists with the Oregon State Police began analyzing Robert's hidden accounts more carefully. They traced several large transfers made under the alias David Harris to accounts in Nevada and Arizona, both linked to shell companies registered under fictitious names. These shell companies, investigators learned, were connected to a construction supply chain suspected of money laundering. In fact, federal authorities had been quietly monitoring the network for over a year. Suddenly, Robert's murder was no longer just a matter of family secrets. It had the fingerprints of organized crime. Detectives contacted federal agents, who confirmed that Robert had been on their radar. According to them, he had become involved with individuals suspected of laundering money through inflated construction contracts and property deals. Robert may not have been a major player, but his access to multiple states, his legitimate business as cover, and his willingness to operate under aliases made him useful. The problem, however, was that people like Robert often became disposable once they knew too much. This revelation introduced the chilling possibility that Robert Mitchell had not only deceived his family but had also placed himself in the crosshairs of dangerous men. The twist deepened when investigators learned that Robert had recently tried to cut ties with this network. A subpoena of his emails revealed draft messages, never sent, expressing his desire to walk away from the arrangement. In one draft he wrote, "I can't keep doing this. It's too risky and people are starting to ask questions. I'm done after this month." Detectives believed Robert's decision to back out may have directly led to his murder. He had become a liability. At the same time, new evidence complicated the domestic angle. Detectives discovered that Karen Mitchell had accessed Robert's computer weeks before his death. Forensic analysis showed she had opened financial files and personal documents linked to his false identity. When confronted, Karen admitted she had been suspicious of Robert's late nights and unexplained absences. One evening while he was away, she had searched his office computer. What she found confirmed her worst fears: evidence of another life, other bank accounts, and strange emails. Karen claimed she never confronted Robert directly, choosing instead to remain silent until she knew the whole truth. Detectives now had proof that Karen had been aware of at least part of Robert's secret world before his murder. This revelation raised a crucial question: had Karen's knowledge pushed her toward revenge? Or had she merely stumbled upon the truth that others, far more dangerous, already knew? Meanwhile, Anna Rowe provided her own surprising detail. She told investigators that on October 11th, just 2 days before Robert's death, she had overheard him on a phone call. His tone was tense and urgent, and though she could not hear the other person, Robert said words that unsettled her. "If this doesn't stop, I'm finished. You don't understand, I have everything to lose." Anna remembered him pacing the living room of the Roseville house, running his hands through his hair, looking pale and nervous. When she asked him who he was talking to, Robert brushed her off, saying it was just business. For detectives, this account added weight to the theory that Robert had angered someone in the network he was involved with. The midpoint of the case came sharply into focus. Robert Mitchell was not merely a man living a double life with another woman. He was a man trapped between two collapsing worlds: the betrayal of his family and the threats from criminal associates. His murder could just as easily have been the result of domestic rage as it could have been a calculated silencing by men who wanted him out of the way. Adding to the complexity, the mysterious man in the dark sedan reappeared in the investigation. Detectives released a sketch based on the security guard's description. Soon after, a tip came in from a bartender in Springfield, who claimed to have seen Robert arguing with a man who resembled the sketch. According to the bartender, this encounter occurred in late September, just weeks before Robert's death. The man had slammed a glass on the counter, leaned in close to Robert, and muttered something that sounded like a threat. Detectives suspected this man was connected to the laundering scheme, possibly an enforcer or partner. But no identity could be confirmed. For the Mitchell family, the revelations were devastating. Karen struggled with the dual emotions of grief and betrayal. She told her sister that Robert's murder felt like losing him twice. First when she learned of his lies, and again when he was taken from her. Allison, still a teenager, withdrew further, refusing to speak to reporters or friends. The image of Robert as a loving husband and father had crumbled completely, replaced by a stranger they barely recognized. Public opinion also shifted. Initially sympathetic to Karen, some began to suspect she might have reached a breaking point. Others believed Robert's murder was a professional hit, tied to business or criminal connections. The media capitalized on the confusion, framing the story as a sordid mix of love, lies, and possible mob involvement. Headlines screamed, "Double life, double death," and was Robert Mitchell killed by his wife, or by his enemies? By the midpoint of the investigation, detectives were more uncertain than ever. They had uncovered Robert's secret home, his mistress, his aliases, his criminal entanglements, and his desperate desire to escape them. But the central question remained unresolved. Who had pulled the trigger on Highway 58 that night? Was it a scorned wife seeking justice for betrayal, a mistress deceived into rage, or ruthless associates eliminating a liability? The case that had begun as a tragic suburban homicide had now transformed into a high-stakes puzzle involving crime, deceit, and betrayal on multiple levels. And with every new discovery, the possibility of uncovering the truth grew more dangerous. By late November 2006, the Mitchell case had reached a boiling point. Detectives felt the weight of community pressure, the unrelenting media coverage, and the sheer complexity of Robert's double life. Every lead pulled them in a different direction, and every new discovery added another layer of conflict. What had started as a straightforward homicide had become a battle between competing theories, with Karen Mitchell, Anna Rowe, and Robert's shadowy business contacts all under suspicion. Investigators intensified their scrutiny of Karen Mitchell. For weeks, she had maintained a careful balance between grief and cooperation, but her emotions often betrayed her during questioning. Detectives pressed her harder about the night of October 13th. One officer noted that Karen became defensive when asked whether she knew about Robert's trips to California. She admitted, after hesitation, that she had confronted him once in September. Robert had dismissed her questions, claiming his absences were strictly work-related. Karen said she didn't press further, not wanting to create a fight in front of Allison. But her statement conflicted with earlier interviews, in which she insisted she had never directly asked him about his absences. This inconsistency fueled suspicion. Adding to the tension, detectives uncovered a potentially damning piece of evidence: a gun purchase registered to Karen's late father, who had passed away in 2004. The weapon, a .38 caliber revolver, was never found after his death. Karen admitted she had inherited some of her father's belongings but insisted she never had possession of the gun. Still, the match to the caliber used in Robert's murder was too close to ignore. Investigators began quietly building a possible case against her, even as they lacked physical proof. Meanwhile, the business angle continued to expand. Federal investigators provided Oregon detectives with additional intelligence about the laundering scheme. They confirmed that Robert's name had surfaced in conversations among suspects under surveillance. Intercepted phone calls revealed discussions about the Oregon guy who couldn't be trusted. Detectives now strongly suspected Robert had been marked as a liability. Yet proving direct involvement between these men and Robert's murder proved elusive. The enforcer in the leather jacket, seen both near Robert's office and possibly at a Springfield bar, remained unidentified. The conflict deepened further when new forensic results arrived. Analysis of dirt on Robert's shoes indicated he had stepped into soft ground before his death, soil not found at the turnout where his body was discovered. This suggested Robert may have been taken to another location first, then brought back to his SUV after being shot. If true, this pointed away from a spontaneous domestic killing and toward a planned execution. Yet the absence of foreign fingerprints or DNA in the SUV left detectives frustrated. Whoever had killed Robert knew how to leave little behind. In early December, tensions exploded publicly. Detectives obtained a search warrant for the Mitchell home, citing inconsistencies in Karen's statements and the missing revolver. The raid drew media frenzy, with television cameras capturing officers carrying boxes of files, computers, and personal belongings out of the house. Karen stood on the front lawn, pale and shaking, insisting to reporters that she had nothing to hide. The search turned up no weapon, but investigators did find handwritten notes in Karen's drawer. One note, apparently written during the weeks before Robert's death, read, "How many lies can one person tell before it destroys everything?" Another scribble on the same page read, "He doesn't deserve my loyalty anymore." While not a confession, the notes painted an image of a woman deeply embittered by her husband's betrayal. The media seized upon this, framing Karen as a scorned wife with a clear motive. Talk shows debated whether she should already be charged. Some neighbors distanced themselves from her, whispering that she must have known far more than she let on. Others defended her, arguing she was being scapegoated because police couldn't solve the crime. The pressure placed Karen under a harsh spotlight, leaving her emotionally frayed. At the same time, Anna Rowe grew increasingly uneasy. Reporters camped outside her home in Roseville, while investigators continued questioning her about Robert's finances and his mysterious contacts. She admitted to detectives that Robert had sometimes paid for things in large amounts of cash, far more than a contractor's income could explain. She also recalled seeing him with a second phone, which he kept locked and hidden. Anna claimed she never asked questions, fearing the answers. But privately, she told friends she was terrified. If Robert had been killed by dangerous people, what did that mean for her safety? The conflict reached its peak when, in mid-December, investigators received a chilling anonymous letter mailed to the Eugene Sheriff's Office. The letter, typed on plain paper, read, "Robert Mitchell wasn't loyal. He thought he could walk away. That's why he's gone. Stop looking at his wife, she's just another victim." The envelope bore no return address, and forensic tests revealed no fingerprints. Some detectives believed the letter was genuine, possibly from someone within the network who wanted to divert attention away from Karen. Others thought it could be a hoax, designed to mislead the investigation. This development split the investigative team. One faction believed strongly that Karen had orchestrated the murder, possibly using the missing revolver. Another faction argued the case was bigger than a domestic crime, involving people Robert had crossed in his illicit dealings. Both sides had compelling points, but neither could prove their case in court. The rising conflict left detectives clashing internally, just as the media's coverage intensified the public's demand for answers. By the end of 2006, the Mitchell case had reached maximum pressure. Karen Mitchell was being painted as a likely suspect, yet there was no hard evidence. Federal authorities hinted at criminal networks but offered no concrete link to Robert's death. Anna Rowe, once the secret mistress, was now living in fear and public humiliation. And the community of Eugene, once shocked by the tragedy, now simmered with speculation and division. The investigation stood at a crossroads. Detectives knew they were close to a breakthrough, but they also knew the wrong conclusion could shatter lives. The conflict had reached its peak, and the stage was set for the final revelations that would either expose the true killer or leave the case tangled forever in uncertainty. By early January 2007, nearly 3 months after Robert Mitchell's body was found, the investigation had exhausted every angle. Detectives had chased rumors of mob ties, business disputes, and a vengeful spouse, but none of these paths had produced definitive proof. The Mitchell case had become one of the most frustrating mysteries in Lane County, a puzzle of lies and betrayal without a clear solution. The final report issued by the sheriff's office reflected the tangled nature of the case. It acknowledged 3 dominant theories. First, that Karen Mitchell could have killed her husband out of anger after discovering his double life. Second, that Anna Rowe may have been unknowingly pulled into a web of lies and abandoned, possibly giving her motive. And third, that Robert's involvement with criminal networks left him vulnerable to being silenced. Each theory carried weight, yet investigators admitted the evidence was circumstantial at best. No murder weapon was ever recovered, no fingerprints or DNA linked a suspect to the scene, and the anonymous letter offered only more questions. For Karen, life after the investigation was marked by suspicion and isolation. Though she was never charged, the cloud of doubt never lifted. Neighbors who once invited her to summer barbecues now crossed the street to avoid her. Reporters still called her home years later, looking for statements or confessions that never came. Karen withdrew into privacy, focusing on raising Allison and shielding her from the gossip that swirled endlessly around their family. To some, she was the grieving wife of a deceitful man. To others, she remained the prime suspect who had somehow slipped through the cracks of justice. Anna Rowe, too, carried scars from the case. Branded by the press as the other woman, she struggled to rebuild her reputation in California. Friends said she became reclusive, distrustful, and fearful of being followed. She maintained her innocence, insisting she had loved Robert but never knew his true identity until it was too late. As for Robert Mitchell, his legacy was forever tarnished. What had once been the image of a hardworking contractor and family man became the story of a man who built his life on lies. His funeral, held quietly in Eugene, was attended by only close relatives. No public memorial honored him, no community tribute marked his contributions. For many, he was remembered less as a victim than as the architect of his own downfall. The official case file for the Mitchell murder remains open, unsolved to this day. Detectives occasionally revisit it when new tips surface, but none have led to a breakthrough. Highway 58, where Robert's SUV once sat idling with headlights on, has long since returned to anonymity. Yet for those who remember, it remains the site where a carefully constructed life collapsed into tragedy. In the end, the Mitchell case stood as a stark reminder of how secrets can destroy. A family was shattered, reputations were ruined, and a community was left with more questions than answers. Robert Mitchell's death was not just the story of a man murdered in his car, it was the story of betrayal, greed, and the dangerous price of living 2 lives.